Hello, this is Aleksander Garbuz from Journey to Med, and today we're going to be doing a lesson in biology about DNA and RNA. Here's a little overview about what we're going to cover today. We're going to start with what DNA is, and then we're going to move on to DNA versus RNA, and then finish off with different types of RNA. At the end, we'll have a problem question and a few homework problems. So what is DNA? DNA is the hereditary material in humans and almost all other organisms, including viruses. Nearly every cell within an organism has the same DNA, and most of this information is located in the nucleus of the cell. A small amount of DNA is actually found in the cell's mitochondria, and this is called mitochondrial DNA. The information stored within DNA is stored as a code made up of 4 different chemical bases, also referred to as nitrogenous bases. This is adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, referred to as A, G, C, and T. Human DNA consists of about 3 billion of these bases, and more than 99% of these are shared among all humans. The order of these bases determines the information available to the cell for building and maintaining an organism. DNA bases pair with each other to form units referred to as pairs. Adenine pairs with thymine, and cytosine pairs with guanine, AT and CG. Each base is also attached to a single sugar molecule and a phosphate group. Together, these components form a nucleotide. In the bottom left, you can see a little diagram which shows the structure of a nucleotide with a phosphate bond, a 5-carbon sugar, and a nitrogenous base. Nucleotides arrange in 2 long strands to form a spiral called a double helix. The structure of a double helix is compared to a ladder with the base pairs as rungs and the sugar and phosphate groups as vertical pieces of the ladder. On the bottom right, you can see a little diagram of this double helix structure with the base pairs, adenine and thymine pairing, and guanine and cytosine, as well as a sugar-phosphate backbone as the sides of the quote-unquote ladder. DNA versus RNA. DNA and RNA share a variety of similarities and differences. When it comes to the name, DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid, while RNA is ribonucleic acid. Responsibilities-wise, DNA is responsible for replicating and storing genetic information within the cell, and it is also a blueprint for all genetic information stored within an organism. RNA, on the other hand, converts this information into a format that can be used to build proteins. It is then moved to ribosomal protein factories to create these proteins. DNA consists of 2 strands, arranged in a double helix. It is also made up of subunits called nucleotides, as we covered earlier in this lesson. This contains a phosphate, a 5-carbon sugar molecule, and a nitrogenous base. RNA, on the other hand, is made up of 1 strand, but it is also made up of nucleotides. Lengthwise, RNA strands are shorter than DNA, and strands sometimes form secondary double helix structures, and there are only a few thousand base pairs in 1 strand of RNA. DNA is much longer than RNA. It can unravel to up to several centimeters long, and there are millions of bases present in 1 DNA strand. Here are some similarities and differences. The sugar within DNA is called deoxyribose, which has 1 less hydroxyl group than RNA. RNA contains ribose sugar molecules that don't have the hydroxyl modifications of deoxyribose. The bases within DNA are A, T, G, and C, while the bases within RNA are A, U, G, and C. Uracil replaces thymine, so A pairs with U in RNA. DNA is found within a nucleus, while RNA forms within the nucleolus, then moves to specialized regions of the cytoplasm, depending on what type of RNA it is. On the bottom right, you can see a little diagram which shows the little differences between DNA and RNA, with the differences in thymine and uracil, as well as the double helix structure instead of the single strand structure. The different types of RNA. RNA has 3 different types that are responsible for different functions. To start, there is messenger RNA, which is also referred to as mRNA. Copies portions of genetic code through something called transcription, which we're going to cover in a future lesson, and transports these copies to ribosomes, which facilitate the production of proteins from this genetic code. Transport RNA, which is also referred to as tRNA, is responsible for bringing amino acids to the ribosomes. This process is called translation. To finish it off, we have ribosomal RNA, also referred to as rRNA. It is a component of the ribosome itself that is essential for protein production. Now we have a problem question. What is DNA made up of? Feel free to pause the video now and think about this question, or go back in the lesson to look at what we covered. I'll give you a few seconds. Alright, I hope you thought of an answer. Here it is. DNA is a molecule composed of 4 types of smaller chemical molecules called nucleotide bases, or nitrogenous bases. These are adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. The order of these bases is called the DNA sequence. A DNA nucleotide is made up of a sugar molecule, a base, and a phosphate group. Here are a few homework questions. Feel free to look back in this lesson if you're having trouble. True or false? DNA is considered a double helix structure. Which of the following is true? A. The bases that make up a DNA nucleotide are A, U, G, and C. B. There are 3 different types of RNA. C. RNA is typically longer than DNA. Or D. The sugar within DNA is called a ribose. Which nitrogenous bases does RNA share in common with DNA? What differs? And finally, what percentage of DNA do humans share with one another? I hope you enjoyed this lesson, and feel free to look at the future lessons that Journey to Med creates. Thank you so much.